Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Rockin' Royal. Rockin' Navy. Know y'all with me.
Welcome in to a special collaborative edition. I'm currently on camera and I just barely smacked my mic, so excuse me. This is why I have a face for radio. As the great Jake Hatch from Locked On Cougars laughs at me. Collaborative edition right now of the KSL.com Cougar Beat podcast and Locked On Cougars. And I feel like it is only fitting that we go live for the first time on YouTube. Hey, YouTube. Hey, YouTube.
We're here. Hi.
Yeah, because BYU is officially, well, I guess not officially yet, but all but officially joining the coaching carousel right now. Jake Hatch from Locked On Cougars, Sean Walker from KSL.com and the Cougar Beat podcast. Subscribe to both podcasts because they're both awesome. And honestly, they're both really short. So, like, why not, right? Jake, I know you've been making the rounds. Well, my mic is doing weird things. Hold on, guys.
That's okay.
This is why I have a face for radio. I know you've been making the rounds a little bit. Mark Pope to Kentucky. 5-year, $5.5 million deal. This according to CBS Sports' Matt Norlander, who I think was the first person to break this news. Him and Pete Thamel from ESPN, pretty close. Eventually, Jeff Goodman from Field of 68 Media, also on top of it. Just about everybody has confirmed it now at this point. It hasn't totally officially happened yet, but it is on the verge of happening. Mark Pope to Kentucky, $5.5 million average over a 5-year deal. He will be the new head coach at his alma mater, the University of Kentucky, replacing John Calipari, who officially is the head coach at Arkansas now, as of about 48 hours ago, maybe a little bit less. Let's just start right there. What were some of your first thoughts when you heard the news, Jake?
Well, first off, this was a very, very quick move, all things considered. Now, I had talked with enough people in the lead up to this, Sean, and saying that Mark Pope is absolutely on the Kentucky list of candidates for their job, but he was in the quote unquote second tier. And what that means is they were going to chase, obviously, the biggest names out there, the Dan Hurleys of the world, the Nate Oates, the Scott Drew was the most recent one who had a public statement Thursday morning saying that he had passed on the opportunity. He was going to remain with Baylor. Well, after those big names got out of the way, the second tier included Mark Pope. And according to what you mentioned, Matt Norlander, he said that Pope had a set meeting with Mitch Barnhart, the Kentucky AD, that was set up for Thursday. And the whole idea of it was, the premise was, it was set up in case they fell through on the early guys that they were chasing out there. And ultimately that fell through. So they ended up meeting. And I had a person tell me who is far more in the know on this than anybody else, very let's just put it this way, very connected to Mark Pope, who told me if he gets in the room with the Kentucky brass, he is a salesman of the highest order, and I would not be surprised if he sells them on him being their head coach. Well, apparently Pete Thamel is saying he's finalizing that 5-year deal. Matt Norlander saying it's $5 million over 5 years on average. Mark Pope did what he wanted to do. This is a guy who bleeds Kentucky blue, and it appears that he is headed to Lexington, Kentucky. And also add this, Sean, this feels like one of the few jobs that no matter what BYU could or maybe should have done, it wouldn't have mattered. This is Mark Pope's dream job.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, he's a UK alum. He won a national championship with Rick Pitino back in 1996 after a really good career in the Pac-10, by the way. He's Pac-10 Freshman of the Year at Washington, and yet he still moved to Kentucky well before the transfer portal was a thing, well before NIL was a thing. So for those who think transfers are only commonplace in college basketball right now, Mark Pope's got some news for you right there. Pope moves to Kentucky, wins the national title, just adores everything about Rick Pitino, basically learned basketball again from Rick Pitino. And this was always the job that you could see him leaving for. Yes, Pope is an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's all but required to be a head coach at BYU, not officially, but there's kind of some unwritten rules around it and that kind of thing. We'll get into that a little bit later. But you didn't feel like Pope could necessarily be a quote unquote BYU lifer if a job like this came along, if the chance to come home to Lexington came along. I think it came a little bit earlier than even he expected. Not many people thought John Calipari was going to go to Arkansas. As of 2 weeks ago, he wasn't, right? AD Mitch Barnhart and Coach Cal appearing on local television in like this weird, semi-awkward, no, honey, we're not actually like we're staying together for the kids. We're not actually getting divorced. 2 weeks later, Cal is in Fayetteville, and Barnhart is now reaching out to at least his third candidate that we know of. Beyond Nate Oates was on the list. Danny Hurley very publicly turned them down. Jay Wright made a big show of it on the national championship broadcast that he didn't want to go back into coaching. Scott Drew's family flew to Lexington and then flew back, and they decided to stay in Waco. I expect some sort of an extension there from Baylor for keeping him there. So once you got down to that next tier of candidates, I think Mark Pope was a pretty good coach to be the next head coach at the University of Kentucky. The thing that surprised me a little bit, and hold on, I'm getting something. Is that the American Nightmares music that I'm hearing?
Cody Rhodes?
Is Cody Rhodes? Cody Rhodes, the Universal WWE Champion? Just kidding. It's Ronald Weaver III joining us here late at night, executive producer of ESPN 960. Ron, I'm going to try to unmute your mic. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing tonight? No American Nightmare at all for me. Just the regular guy, regular morning, evening, and night guy.
I give you some kind of nickname like Chicago Beef or something like that.
Oh man, Chicago Beef. Okay, I like that one. That's a good one. That's actually first nickname that someone's given me that works. Chicago Beef. Yeah, I'm from Chicago, and you don't want the beef, so I like that. I think I'm gonna roll with that one. Yeah.
I know where you got that Rangers shirt, by the way, also. So it's just.
Oh yeah, he little insight. Late night hours. Jake does know where I got this Rangers shirt.
I do.
That's true. Ron, we got Jake's reaction. We got my reaction a little bit. Mark Pope to Kentucky. It's a 5-year deal, $5.5 million, according to CBS Sports. Matt Norlander, a similar figure from Pete Thamel at ESPN. What was your first thought when you heard the news that Mark Pope is headed back home to the Bluegrass State?
I think the first thing is you have to be happy for Mark Pope and everything that he's accomplished and where he's come from Utah Valley to BYU, now the journey to Kentucky. That's the first thing. So I know a lot of BYU fans are sad about this. I posed this question. It's going to be a sad departure for him, but ultimately in the end, Jake said it. This is his dream. This is where he wanted to end up, was Kentucky. He was in the tier 2 list, and once everybody said no, as the list went on, I started getting slowly like, this is getting closer to where Mark is probably going to get a phone call. And then when the news dropped from CBS Sports that he was an initial candidate, I was like, it's only a matter of time before this deal gets done. And it was going to be very interesting to see how the next 48 hours went. But Kentucky moves fast, and like from sources said, they had this meeting set up from a while ago, so they already knew. And just congratulations to Mark Pope and what he has accomplished and everything. Not shocking at all that this decision did come, especially once the other candidates started saying no. You definitely started looking at that Mark Pope definitely can land in Kentucky, and it did happen. So he's home to Lexington, played there, won a national championship. Everything he accomplished at BYU led to him getting this phone call. Just need to say that BYU does finish 23-11 in the season, top 25 in the poll, 5th in the Big 12 with everything. I know that they didn't win in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but that's also news you don't really need at this point. Everything that he accomplishes here set him up for success. So congrats to him and his family as they move across and everything and the connections that he had. I know he's not surprised by this move at all. What will be interesting now moving forward will be what will BYU do and who they hire. A lot of tough decisions for that department at university to make to replace a guy like Mark Pope.
Yeah, I think the one thing that maybe surprised me about this, and again, I think it surprised Pope to an extent, was, first of all, that the Kentucky job opened as quickly as it did. You felt like Cal wasn't going to be there for too much longer, but he did essentially have a lifetime contract at UK, reportedly $33 million to get rid of him at the university, did ever want to move on. So you felt like he had some security, and there wasn't really much reason for him to leave unless his friend, the Chicken Man, John Tyson, and the University of Arkansas obviously pulled him away, which he ended up doing. John Tyson of Tyson's Chicken, the heir to that billionaire fortune, hence the joke there. The thing that surprised me the most, I think, about this search, though, was, and again, borrowing liberally from Matt Norlander over at CBSSports.com, you guys have probably read it. If you hadn't, you should go read the whole thing right now, is Pope was pretty high on Kentucky AD Mitch Barnhart's list once they got down to that second tier. There was a lot of talk about Billy Donovan, current Chicago Bulls head coach, former two-time national champion at Florida, whether Kentucky could lure him back into college basketball. The Chicago Beef may have something to say as a noted Bulls fan. I actually don't know if you're a Bulls fan, Ron, but I'm just going to assume because you're from Chicago. You might have something
I was paying for Billy Donovan to get the job. It was safe to say.
Right. Yeah, for a lot of reasons as a noted Bulls fan, right? But per Norlander, Barnhart didn't even reach out to Donovan. He didn't even reach out to Dan Hurley, the Connecticut head coach, who pretty staunchly kind of said he wasn't really interested after the national championship game. I think the joke was that his wife might divorce him or something like that if he moved her away from Storrs, Connecticut. Jay can confirm that is definitely a real thing to consider with jobs, right?
Well, let me just say, yes, that is absolutely a thing. But I just want to insert here, the relationship between Mitch Barnhart and Mark Pope actually goes back a long time. Here's the deal. Being a favorite son of the Kentucky Wildcats, being a team captain, a national champion there at Kentucky, Mark has talked to Mitch Barnhart off and on for years about different things involving Kentucky athletics. That relationship was very, very strong. And there's some thought in my mind that that's a big reason why he may have not necessarily pursued, as they said, I think Matt Rosen, they didn't pursue Billy Donovan that heavily. I think it's that Mitch Barnhart had a personal relationship with Mark Pope, and that may have led him to say, you know what, I don't want to have to sit back and wait for Billy Donovan's season to end with the Chicago Bulls whenever it does end, and then execute a move like this. And that may have made him say, you know what, we're moving forward here. Mark Pope's my guy. I'm going to make that hire. But yes, having Mama okay with the job, absolutely a critical thing. And Dan Hurley was dead on with saying that.
Yeah, 100%. And you got to think that a big part of the recruitment for Pope to Kentucky wasn't just recruiting Mark Pope, but also Leanne Pope as well, in a very similar vein like that as well. Leanne I've known her for over a decade now. I don't think Mark would think that I'm speaking out of turn when I say she kind of drives the bus in a lot of ways, as well she rightfully should. So Pope is a Kentucky alumnus. Like we mentioned, he was on that 96 national championship team. He has earned this job in a lot of ways. I mean, let's be totally real. He's 187 and 108 all time as a Division I head coach. That includes a 110 and 52 mark in 5 years at BYU, 2 NCAA tournament appearances, a third that almost no doubt would have come if that 2020 tournament hadn't been canceled a couple of years. He signed an extension after that season as well. So BYU brass thought they were going to the NCAA tournament as well. Then he's also 0-2 all time in the NCAA tournament, 2 first-round losses, both as a 6th seed, both to 11 seeds, one to a UCLA team now that went on to the Final Four, and then most recently in Keith Dambrock's last win at Duquesne. There's a lot of consternation online, guys, right now from Kentucky fans. But is this a good move by Kentucky? And what do you make of Pope and what he's done in the state of Utah, now trying to take that offense and that defense to the SEC and to the Bluegrass States? Ron, what do you think? Let's start with you.
I think up front, I think to acknowledge the Kentucky fans, I think Kentucky fans are surprised by this move as well. But that's how it goes when you're hiring coaches for college basketball. You have a tier of 1, 2, maybe 3 if you get that far. You certain candidates, you have to take not necessarily what's best available, but who's best in that tier. And Mark Pope was what was best in that tier, and he brings a lot to the table. This is a guy, Sean, that's been around the block. He knows how to talk to kids. He knows how to recruit. It's obvious the last 2 years and what he's done with him to the bench and how developed Rudy was already coming into BYU and developing Jackson Robinson. Mark Pope can develop players. He can coach players. There's no doubt about it. He knows how to pick a good staff around him. Look at his assistants. You had Khalil Fennell, who was in charge of the defense this past season, he moves on to get a head coaching job at TRGV. You know, you have Cody Feger, who is more than qualified, either whether he becomes the next coach at BYU or he moves forward, whatever happens with his career, he's a guy that can become a head coach. He has had staff members around, and he's been able to develop players and coach. This is a guy that knows how to move through recruiting, knows how to navigate. He's well engaged, and he's a winner at the end of the day. He wins, and he's able to produce products. And I just think that, you know, we have to see what happens with Jack Robinson's career and what's going to happen with him. But that's a guy, if this guy is an NBA draft prospect, that tells you a lot about what will happen with Mark Pope. I think it's something that goes to tell if Jackson gets drafted later this year in the NBA draft, what that will prove to recruits is Mark Pope can now get you to the NBA, because that's what players want to do when they get to college. What can you do for me to get me to the next level? And Mark Pope has started to prove that he can develop players, and he exceeded all expectations. So the initial reaction maybe for Kentucky fans is that they're surprised by this. But I think you're going to have to let Pope prove himself over time, and I think he's qualified for this position.
Let me insert here, by the way, if Kentucky fans are upset about Mark Pope being 0-2 in the postseason, guess what? The last 2 seasons, you're 0-2 as well.
First round
exits both times. So, hey,
how do we rate a loss to Duquesne and a loss to Oakland?
Well, Jack Golke,
in my book.
Jack Golke is the man. Let's just put it that way. He cashed in on that loss. But let me also add this on the thing is that Mark Pope is going to go to Kentucky, and he's going to give his heart and soul to that university. This was his absolute dream job. I've already said it. I had somebody tell me earlier today that Mark Pope would crawl on his hands and knees over broken glass if it meant he could get this job at Kentucky. And this is his Camelot, whatever terminology you want to use. He wanted this job, and I've seen some comments coming in. David Payne commenting saying this: Pope was going to go to UK at some point. Didn't think it would be now. None of us expected that. John Calipari looked like he was set to stay at Kentucky till he wanted to hang it up. As you mentioned, the Chicken Man, John Tyson, said, "Hey, Cal, I got infinite amount of money. Come coach Arkansas." Okay, I'm coming to Arkansas. Guess what? It opens the opportunity, open the avenue, and Mark Pope, he's going to have to capitalize on this. I really like what you said, Ron, is if Jackson Robinson does get drafted, as I think all three of us expect, we're expecting him to go pro, and we'll see if he's a first or a second round pick in the NBA draft. But if he has that track record, I think some Kentucky fans are going to say, oh, hey, he has developed some NBA talent at BYU. We are going to be able to get better talent than BYU has. And if Mark Pope can develop a kid like that into an NBA talent, why can't he do that here? So, yes, I know the reaction right now from Big Blue Nation down there in the Bluegrass State is not great, because trust me, they're sending out phone numbers and email addresses of athletic directors and such trying to nix this. But I think given the adequate time, the resources, and just how Mark Pope knows how to work a room, I think he will win over the hearts and minds of Wildcat fans.
Let's move back to BYU. What does this mean for BYU? They already knew they were going to be replacing one coach with Khalil Fennell taking the head coaching job at UTRGV. Now they're going to be replacing a head coach and presumably probably an entire staff, or at least most of a staff as well. The Rolodex is fairly short for Tom Holmoe. I don't expect him to use a search committee or anything like that to go find BYU's next coach. Where do you begin to find the next guy to succeed Mark Pope?
Mad Dog. 2 words, Mad Dog. It's Mark Madsen. He is the number one option here for BYU to go after. Now, it's complicated because, as John Wilner pointed out, his original contract with Cal stipulated a $4 million buyout. Well, he signed a 2-year contract extension just recently, which I would assume increased that buyout. And our good friend, all three of us know Robbie McCombs fairly well. Robbie has indicated in his writing about this that there are extra stipulations on him going to Stanford and or BYU in his deal as well. So you start with Mad Dog. Here's the deal. I know that $4 million plus might be a little bit cost prohibitive for BYU in yesteryear. This is a new era of college sports and a new era for BYU athletics. If you are going to be the big dog you aspire to be, you go and pay that buyout. If Mark Madsen is willing to entertain coming back to BYU, he is far and away the number one option.
And to add to that, if we're going to be honest, why wouldn't you entertain that option? You know, it's like Jake said, you're in the Big 12 now. Money, last thing that really should be on your mind. It's all about the dollar bills to a degree, but this is a guy who you had in the room originally, also with Mark Pope, who you're interviewing. Those are the final two guys you were picked between, and you went with Mark Pope. So if Mark Madsen is willing to come back to Provo, Utah, like Jake said, you absolutely entertain it. You do not throw it away. You go ahead and you buy that out, and you go ahead and do that. I'm not saying telling Ryan Smith what to do, but you got Ryan Smith down there at BYU with you. You know, Ryan, if you're listening, I mean, hey, you guys make it work. Do whatever you need to do to get Mad Dog here, because this is when you talk about your roster too and what you have, there's most likely that Jackson Robinson's probably not going to come back. Let's just say that. But if Jackson's going to take that last year of college eligibility, he's probably going to follow Pope and go to Kentucky. I also could potentially see Ali Khalifa going to Kentucky and following Mark Pope. That's how it goes. Coaches leave, players follow. So if you want to retain what you have, having Mad Dog, who's been able to bring guys in, would help. But if you really want to also, I always say, lift where you stand as well. And lift is a guy who's 45 minutes up the road. Chris Burgess is another option. This is a guy who's very familiar with your program. If you really want to go through the whole recruiting, Sean, this is a guy who was in the room for Dallin Hall. A lot of fans for BYU are worried right now about what's going to happen with Colin Chandler. Yes, he was a part of that recruitment before he left. Chris Burgess, the key part. He also recruited. Yeah. He recruited, also helped Trey Stewart, also recruited Trevor Neal. There's a bunch of guys still in this roster, Atiki, Richie Saunders, who are very familiar with Chris Burgess. So if you can't succeed with Mad Dog, or if you're looking for other options as well, Chris Burgess, who's at Utah, is another guy who you definitely should entertain as a head coach, because he has ties and he's recruited some of the guys on this roster right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of salary implications, I think, with Burgess and why he went back to his alma mater at the University of Utah. Last public records check I made, he was making about $280,000, somewhere in that range, which BYU couldn't pay for an assistant coach. Now, as a head coach,
at that time, by the way, at
that time, yes. At that time. Now, as a head coach, though, you got to imagine the salary would be significantly higher than that, especially with BYU in the Big 12 and cashing those Big 12 checks. I don't think money's going to be an issue with Burgess anymore. I think he's absolutely a phone call. He's absolutely worth, just investigating and seeing if he would be interested in taking the job at BYU, especially with Pope out of the way. I'd also keep really close tabs on Cody Feger. I know he's not a member of the LDS Church, but we saw recently with Diljeet Taylor and the women's cross country team, that's not a hard set rule or policy at BYU. Yes, it is preferred. It makes things a lot easier in the hiring process for sure. So I don't think BYU is necessarily going to go out of their way to hire a non-LDS head coach, but it does happen. It has happened. Like 3 of their last 4 wrestling coaches before they got the program also weren't LDS. I know that from particular experience. So I do think you maybe try to keep Cody Feger close to the program, whether that's as a head coach or retaining him as an assistant. Remember also him and Burge worked together on Pope's staff at Utah Valley as well as BYU. So there could be something there as well.
Sean, real quick on that, you and I are old enough, and Ron, you may know a little bit about this, but there was a time when Dave Rose was at BYU. There was a lot of people out there saying that if BYU was ever going to hire a non-LDS head coach, at that time it was Dave Rice. Dave Rice was ingratiated at BYU, knew what was going on inside that program. You know who the latter day version of that is? It's Cody Feger. He's got 10 years experience at BYU in and around the program. If there is one person who is not a baptized member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on that campus that knows as much about BYU basketball, it's got to be Cody Feger. So yes, if they want to break precedent, if Mark Pope wants, Tom Homo, wants to make a real strong statement that yes, you don't have to be a card-carrying member of the LDS faith to be a head coach of one of the major sports at BYU, Cody Feger is going to be about as good a candidate as there is going to be. But I'm also going to add this. I just don't see it happening. I just don't see the people, the board of trustees at the top of the food chain here when it comes to this hiring decision. I just don't see them signing off on maybe the second most high-profile position at Brigham Young University going to a non-member of the LDS faith. So I got nothing against Cody. And by the way, if you can keep him on staff, they do well to keep him, because I would fully expect Mark Pope is very interested in bringing him with him to Kentucky.
Absolutely. I think. Go ahead, John.
Keep in mind also that Pope's also got to put together his own staff at the University of Kentucky.
Yes.
He knows guys. He's very familiar with certain individuals. Is that same phone call to Cody Feger or maybe even Chris Burgess also one Pope's now going to make as he's moving across the country, Ron?
It's very true. That's what I was going to bring up. Just as much as Cody could get the head coaching job at BYU. That'd be great. If you want to talk about, I don't want to say necessarily the best non-member for the job, but the guy who has 10 plus years of experience at BYU, has experience at Utah Valley, at the University of Utah, who's been in the state for a long time. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I've heard people, say, is this guy a member of the LDS Church? It's like, no, he's not. Like, people already around think, he fits that mold of what a BYU coach is and what the culture is, and he does. And he's not a member. So I wanted to take a chance on a guy and do that who's already in your program, who understands, who you can trust. It is Cody Fueger, but I'm going to second with Jake. I don't see the board of trustees. You have to remember with the BYU, there's that second barrier that you got to get through. And I don't see that second barrier saying yes to this. They should, but I don't think they will. Cody's just a job. But even if they said yes, Mark Pope, if he were a smart man, which he's a very smart man, you definitely believe that Cody Fueger could be on that Kentucky staff. Cody Fueger is a big reason, a part of BYU's offense and why they were shooting threes so well, in the nation, what they're able to do, a part of the development of a Jackson Robinson, why Ali Khalil's top 4 in assist to turnover ratio. Cody Fueger was a big part of that offense. You heard on BYU Sports Nation, that was his job, was to run the offense under Mark Pope. So that's that Mark Pope is going to bring guys along, and if he has a person he can call, the first person will be Cody Fueger.
I don't want to get too into this. This is mostly a quip, mostly a joke, guys, but former BYU assistant Cahill Fennell also just barely took the UT RGV job. He's a former Louisville assistant, came up under Chris Mack at Louisville. Maybe that's a number that you call to try to bring back to the Bluegrass State at Kentucky, even though he literally just got the RGV job, 48 hours ago, maybe 72.
He's been in Edinburgh for like 2 days, Sean. Don't do this.
Exactly.
I don't wish that on anybody. I don't wish that on anybody. Nobody. Yeah. None of that.
The man hasn't even had a chance to pass gas in his new house. Leave him be.
I guarantee he hasn't unpacked everything. 100%. Cahill Fennell has not unpacked everything in his new home in Edinburgh. So just let him go. Let him go. Let him have his own program, guys. Cahill Fennell, by the way, going to do really good things in the Southland. As well.
It's a good hire.
A couple other names that I'm thinking about, and I'll just kind of rattle through a couple through them really quickly. Although, Jake, I know you know one of these guys pretty personally from your day job, so maybe I want to get your opinion on him. But first, I'll start with UNLV associate head coach Barrett Peary. I think it's probably got to be an option. Payson High graduate, member of the church. He's a former head coach at Portland State. Did really good things there. He was also on that Texas Tech staff that led the nation in offense years and years ago as an assistant. So he knows how to recruit Texas, knows the Big 12.
Also really good on defense as well. He was their defensive coordinator on that team as well.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. So I think Barrett Peary, a lot of people are going to dismiss him for where he's at. Maybe it's fair. I think he's worth at least a look, see if he's interested in moving on up from UNLV and taking over the reins of a Power 5 program. As well. The other name that I might consider, and Jake will probably discount this immediately because he knows this guy personally, but former Utah Jazz assistant and current Dallas Mavericks assistant, Alex Jensen. He's a Viewmont High grad, came up through the U. He's also an NBA guy. I don't know if he wants to come to college basketball, but he had very close contact with BYU the last time they made a hire. Also entertained Utah Valley a time or two, at least one time. I know that for sure. So he has had contact to be a collegiate head coach. Would he be interested at all in leaving the NBA to come coach college basketball, Jake?
In a word, no. I'm just going to say that right now. Here's the deal. If Alex Jensen's not willing to leave an NBA assistant job to take the head coaching job at his alma mater at Utah, because trust me, there have been overtures made to him at multiple points to come back to Utah and be a part of that program. I just don't see him wanting to embrace the recruiting grind. I think he likes the fact in the NBA, you don't have to recruit guys. You draft them, you bring them in. He loves developing guys, having to go through NIL and transfer portal and the recruiting grind of the college game and having limited time on the court to develop guys. I just think those are all strikes against why Alex Jensen would want to entertain this. But hey, you make the phone call. You say, hey, Alex, I'm Tom Homo, athletic director at BYU. Would you have interest in talking to us about our head coaching position? Yes, no. Okay. Thanks for your time. And then you move forward from there. He's on the list. There's no doubt he's absolutely on that list, but I think your top three are easily Mad Dog, Chris Burgess, and then Barrett Peary. And then you drop down, yes, to the Alex Jensen. And also, I'll insert Kevin Young's name here. He's the associate head coach of the Phoenix Suns. He is a member of the LDS Faith, born in Salt Lake City, has been an NBA career assistant at this point, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he's ever worked in the college game, but the fact that he's got ties to the Faith and obviously ties to Utah, that puts him on that list as well.
Absolutely. I don't think Alex Jensen would entertain this job offer very often, but he's probably worth a phone call. He's at least worth reaching out and checking in on that. Andrew May at Snow College, possibly worth it. We're now getting down to that tier 2 or maybe even tier 3. But he's done really nice things at Snow College. He was on Pope's staff briefly, and he worked with Dave Rose at BYU. So I think he's there. If you want to go the high school route, Quincy Lewis just barely became the Utah High School Activities Association leader in state championships. The man can coach, and he's worked at BYU before. Obviously an active member of the Faith. BYU, we saw on the women's basketball side, isn't afraid necessarily to hire a decorated, successful high school coach, as they did with Amber Whiting in the women's basketball realm as well. So I don't think it's totally out of the picture to think that Quincy Lewis might get a sniff. And if you're throwing high school coaching names in there, I think Wasatch Academy's Paul Peterson also got to be in the mix as well. Wasatch Academy, very unique with their national program. It runs a little bit more like a junior college, if not sometimes a Division I university than a high school. So that's not as big of a jump as I think some fans would think typically from high school to the collegiate ranks. Any names I'm leaving out, Ron, that you can think of?
Yeah, I think you can't forget about Danny Ainge, man. You got to get Danny Ainge up into the coach. that is strictly joke, guys. I wanted to.
Jazz fans are going to be coming for you.
They are. A lot of people are going to come for me saying that. No, I think that's a lot of the people. You can think of. Obviously, we say Cody Figure, who's the wild card. Probably maybe someone they'll give a conversation to. I mean, you run it past the brethren, but if they shut it down, they shut it down. Obviously, but you definitely do. But I there might be one more that I'm missing, but I'll let Jake handle that one.
Well, I was going to say there's one in the college game. It's Casey Beard. He's currently with the University of Houston. He's on the staff down there with the Cougars in Houston. He's a member of the Faith. He's a career assistant, so he's similar to Chris Burgess, where he doesn't have head coaching experience to my knowledge at the collegiate level. But Houston, come on. They're doing some incredible things with the Red Cougars down there in Houston. So the fact that he's got this college experience, he's in the Big 12, he's familiar with a top level college basketball program. You can't discount him on that list as well. But I don't know of any natural connections between him and Brigham Young University. But let's be honest, you mentioned, or I think it was you, Ron, that said that BYU, or it might have even been you, Sean, saying that BYU is not going to use this search group. They don't need to. They know who their candidates are out there in the world, and they'll sort through those in short order. But the funny thing is, a lot of people think this Rolodex is really small. I think we're upwards of almost 10 candidates here, guys. So there's a fair amount of names out there for BYU to comb through.
Yeah, and we haven't even gone to maybe a couple of lesser known candidates. Lee Kamard, BYU women's basketball associate.
That's what I was going to say. Does Lee gets a call, I think, as well.
Nick Robinson's on staff right now, and he's got head coaching experience for what it's worth.
I think Lee Kamar does get a phone call. This is a guy. I know that they went a different direction when they hired Amber White, and they took of a high school coach, and you've seen already what she's doing with recruiting the players that she's been able to bring in. But Lee Kamar, I think, was the next in line who was going to get the job before that. So I think Lee is someone that does get a call, and he has been around the program already. He fits the mold, played at BYU. This is a guy that knows the recruiting process and who's very, very well connected, even on being on the women's side of it. So I think that's someone, like Jake said, if this was a Rolex, my watch, then we need something to be bigger, because they got a lot of decisions and a lot of people that they're going to be interviewing over the next couple of weeks that they're going to do this. Starting at the top, they got tier 1, 2, and 3. So don't be surprised if it's any one of these guys that gets the call.
Okay, Sean, real quick, Ron mentioned something right there. The next couple of weeks, I don't think BYU can afford to let this linger. Here's the deal. I know that things move slowly at BYU. I am begging BYU administration, get with the times. You need to make this hire in the next week. If you want this roster as currently constituted to stay intact, whatever level you think it can stay intact, you have got to identify who you think is the top candidate. You've got to interview them. You got to run them through whatever process you got to do to vet them with the church leadership and university leadership. And you've got to get them into that position, because here's the deal. There are going to be sharks circling this BYU roster. They're going to try and pick off every single top-level player they can. Dallin Hall is a bona fide Power 5 point guard. Ali Khalifa is absolutely incredible. Fousseyni Traore, Trevin Nell, Noah Waterman, all of them are capable of contributing at top-level programs, and you can guarantee if they haven't been contacted tonight by people about transfer portal options, guess what? It's coming tomorrow. And you've got to be able to stave that off. So I am begging BYU administration, just if you guys don't listen to me ever, I know this, but stop with making this play out over multiple weeks / a month. You cannot afford to have that happen in this circumstance.
I agree with Jake on that. And just to say this as a current BYU student myself, the last week of classes are next week. They finish on Wednesday just to go along with that. These guys' season is over. Yeah, I agree with Jake. If this decision is not made by the time the classes end next Tuesday or Thursday, BYU is going to be in a world of trouble, because you got a lot of guys that he just named that are going to be hitting the transfer portal. I still believe that you're going to lose some guys who might, but if you don't want to lose the guys who are maybe coming back from missions, the guys who are planning to come in, then you need to make a decision very quickly on who they're going to be coached by, who they're going to be under. Because I wouldn't be surprised if you have multiple guys on this roster leave. Because like Jake said, if it's not tomorrow, then it's going to be Monday. There's going to be a lot of guys in the coming week on this roster. They're going to be announcing that they're going into the portal and that are talented and that will take their talents elsewhere. So if you're BYU, I'm not saying make a decision tomorrow, but the decision needs to be sooner rather than later.
The coaching carousel stops for no one. It's BYU's turn to take a spin on the carousel. And then there will be more trickling down from there, all because of SMU's decision, guys, to fire Rob Lanier after only 2 seasons.
It's true. That started it.
The Ponies gave up some TV money, gave up all their TV money for 9 years to join the ACC, and now BYU coach Mark Pope is headed to Kentucky. College sports, y'all. College sports. I think that's good. I think we'll wrap it up because it's getting a little bit late. I know Jake finally put his children to bed, but Jake, do you want to wrap us up?
Well, I'm going to sleep for like 3 hours before I got to go back and do radio, but nonetheless, it's all good. David Payne's got a really good point here in this comment here. If we're going to be going for non-members, wait and talk to Billy Donovan since UK didn't want to chat with him, LOL. Hey. If you can hire,
you might not have a job in a week. I don't know. Are the Bulls are in the play-in tournament by now, right, Ron?
They are.
So you might have to wait for that.
Don't worry, it won't be for long. Don't worry.
I'm just saying, hey, if we're gonna go with the whole non-member route, Billy Donovan, you can do a lot worse than Billy Donovan. It feels like.
Yeah, time may be of the essence, but Billy Donovan might be unemployed in a week, and you know what? That wouldn't be a terrible hire. Also from David Payne, thanks for joining us in the chat. If Mad Dog doesn't get the job, start filling the baptismal font for Cody Figure.
Hey, former BYU basketball player Jonathan Tavanari said it. How fast can Cody Figure take the discussions? Guys, I know several people in the area that can make that happen.
I know two at least. I definitely know too. We'll wrap it. We'll get out of here on that. We'll wrap it up. But for those who missed it, you haven't by now. BYU coach Mark Pope headed to Kentucky as the next men's basketball coach. BYU's got a big job. The carousel stops for nobody. So time to get back to work. Jake Hatch from the Locked On Cougars podcast. Ronald Weaver, the third executive producer of ESPN 960 Radio. I'm Sean Mark from KSL.com. Thanks for joining us, guys, for this late night video edition of the podcast. We'll get it out to the respective feeds if you guys want it as well. We'll simulcast some of it and whatnot and get that out for you guys. Thanks also for joining us in an audio format. If you haven't subscribed, Locked On Cougars, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Yep. YouTube.com/LockedOnCougars.
They do good stuff.
And then Cougar Sports on ESPN 960 as well on your respective platforms of choice. Guys, thanks so much for joining me here late night to talk about the big news.
Rock and royal. Rock your hands. Rockabye babies, rock the stands with the fans. If you with us, raise your hands. Rockabye baby, rockin' Navy. Shout out to my teams, wives and babies. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy. Know you with me? Let's get it, baby. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy. Know you with me? Let's get it, baby. We going long like a cougar tail. Defense hitting hard like some seashells. Getting to the green, I ain't talking kale. Boy, that team up north, man, but